Hello. In this video, we are going to look at how to use a SSIS script task to process C# code specifically to accomplish a regular expression evaluation against some email data. The idea is that we want to be able to validate whether an email is good or not using the support of regular expressions that comes with C#, but doesn't come with SQL Server's SQL programming language. Anyway, let's get started and we'll see how it's done. Now I have a Visual Studio solution already prepared. And here is a SSIS project and a package inside of it. This package includes a script task that will use C# code. The script task can be brought in from the SSIS toolbox by just locating it and then dragging it onto the surface of the package. To edit the script task, I'll right-click and say Edit. When it comes up, I can choose between multiple languages I have installed on my machine. Currently, I only have 2 languages installed that are registered for use with SSIS, Visual Basic and C#. While I want to use C#, I want to caution you that if you choose Visual Basic inadvertently and hit the Edit Script button, it'll bring up a new editing window. And in this case, I notice that I have some C# code. I can tell because there's no curly braces, nor is there any semicolons. Knowing that I have it wrong, I close this down. Now, if I cancel, I can re-choose my language. But if I say OK, that has become immutable. I can't change it. I come back in here, I can see that it is indeed locked into Visual Basic. I don't want that, so the only choice I have is to delete that script and just get a new one. Not difficult, but something you should know about. From there, I can double-click on this script, choose C# and hit the Edit Script button and type in any code I want. One thing to note is that you have to have an entry point for your code to run out of. The entry point in most cases is something like a main method, function, or module. In this case, the main method is where we put our code. Nice folks at Microsoft actually even put a little note there saying, add your code here. If all goes well, we will return a successful status. If it doesn't, we can return a failure status, and that can be used to control the flow of your ETL process. So that's a quick overview. Let's take a look at the example I've created. I'll go ahead and open that up and hit the Edit button. Now once the editor opens up, you'll see that it is indeed in C#, and I've got some C# code in here already. One of the pieces of code I have is a method I made called isValid. You give me a string that's to represent the email address for some data, and I will use a pattern that has regular expression syntax to identify a set of characters, one or more coming before the @ symbol, followed by either some numbers or more characters, and finally followed up with a dot and a prefix at the end of like .com or .info, or etc. Now, it's important to note that this particular string is a good one. It has a lot of choices, and you can see it's pretty complex, but it's still not exhaustive. Getting a good regular expression to validate all types of email mistakes is very difficult. You'll find a number of them on the internet, but this one will work for today. What I'll do is I'll put that long string of characters into a variable called string pattern. I'll use that pattern variable, and then along with it with a flag. And after that, I will make up a brand new regular expression object that uses that pattern. I will then go through and use the match command of the regular expression object to see whether or not the email that I'm looking at matches. The email is what came in to the method. If it does, I will indicate that everything's good by setting my Boolean flag to true and returning it. If it does not match, then the flag will never be true. It'll stay at false and return false. That's the use of this method. The new much just validates a pattern. Now, what I've got here is down in the main method. I will go through and I will try to call this testing separate valid test data method. And the idea behind this method is to open up a text file called email data. It's one we saw in an earlier video. In here, I have a valid email address and a number of very invalid email addresses. No @ symbol, no letters before the @ symbol, again no @ symbol, not even a com. This is all right, but it has no extension at the end. This one here is actually in pretty good shape. This one's messed up. So some are good, some are bad. That's the data we're going to try to validate. I'll read that, and then I'll try to write the valid data to a valid email text file, which I don't have yet, but we will make when this code runs. And invalid data will be written to an invalid email data file. So I'm going to take all the data, I'm going to split it up into two different files. Now, to accomplish that, I'll just take a while loop. I'm using a while loop because it's very similar to SQL. So if you're used to SQL programming, this is pretty easy to understand. Basically, for each item in the file, I want you to read out the line. And until it's the case that you've run out of data, in other words, as long as it's not null, I want you to go ahead and put that data into this variable, and then check to see if it's valid by calling my isValid function. The first email will be sent over to my isValid method, in which case it'll check to see if it's valid and return true because it is. At that point, because it evaluates to true, it'll go ahead and write to my valid file. If, on the other hand, on the next line it evaluates to false, which it would, it will then write to the invalid file. It'll then keep looping through the loop until it's done. Just notice that the counter actually wasn't necessary. I'm going to remove that. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, and when we're done, we have to close the connections of the files. If something goes awry, most likely the error is that you haven't placed the file on the folder in the hard drive. What I mean by that is you need to, on C drive, make a folder called Data to Process and put a file with the exact same name, email data, in there. Now, I'll call my method and it will go through the process. If there's any issue, it'll jump down here to the exception. As I've mentioned here, it's the most likely cause you don't have the correct folder, so I'll just make a message. And I'll fire off an error message to return back to the events log in SSIS, which remember used to be called DTS. I will also indicate that it was a failure for this task. So, you go ahead and say OK, and we'll run this. It'll start the process, open up the script editing window, pause here on the method call because that starts off with the main method, in which case now I can go up here and open these files. Now, We know that this file already exists in the folder. But the next file doesn't. However, they will be created for us in the C# code. Next, go through and examine the data, read the lines, examine it against the pattern. Because that's a valid email, the flag gets set to true, comes back, and writes the valid data. The next one, though, is not valid. So when it comes up here and starts running through it, it's missing the @ symbol. It will not be true, so it'll be sent back as false. And it'll keep doing that until it's all out of data. Now, when I take a look at the contents, I'll see that my valid email file, let's click on the right file. My valid email data shows the 2 emails that were valid. My invalid shows the other ones. Typically, this can be looked at by the human to determine what went wrong. Now that we've seen how to create a script task with some C# code and use it to validate an email address and write it to the file, we can look at an example of what we might do with that. So here I've created 2 staging tables. One that has a list of valid emails and another one for invalid. Then I'll go through and use a data flow task to pick up the data from the valid and invalid flat file, convert them to Unicode, and deposit them in their appropriate tables. That should be invalid. Okay, so with this, I should be able to run that package. Once the package is completed running, I can go into Microsoft SQL Server and verify that the tables have been filled with data. This is the invalid one with my invalid emails. This is the valid. You can see the difference. Now that you've seen how we can use some custom C# code in an SSIS script task, we're going to look at some alternative methods that you might want to use. The great thing about the script task is the actual code is stored in the package file. If you right-click on the package file and you choose View Code in the context menu, you'll see a block of XML code with the C# code you typed in right there in the file. But if you would like to use that same code for other packages or maybe other systems, you need some other tools to do that. And that's our next stop. I'll see you there.